everybody to this very fabulous presentation we're going to have this afternoon. I've seen a short version of it and was just enthralled with it. I'm just going to get that. Our presenter today is John Godoy. John is an international speaker, award-winning inventor, and a martial artist. He provides edutaining sessions for audiences large and small, from organ transplants patients to Silicon Valley engineers, from university students in India to even a candidate for the United States Senate. John is co-founder of SitFlow, a Mayo Clinic NEAT certified exercise product that makes sitting healthier. Through his private fitness company, he has shaped up Chicago's elite. From entertainment to finance, he has helped Harpo producers stay fit and billionaires accept that health is earned and not bought. And yes, he has met Oprah. By blending Eastern wisdom, healthy lifestyle, and entrepreneurial practicality, John strives to empower his audiences to get the most out of their personal and professional lives. Get ready to learn some new ideas and strategies that will help you adapt and thrive in the normal. Please help me welcome John Godoy.
Thank you, Wendy. Before we get started, I'm just going to quickly make out just one little logistical issue. In order to get the most of what I'm sharing with you, I'd like for you to, when I do share my PowerPoint slide, which I'll be jumping in and out of throughout the workshop today, the session today, I'd like you to toggle. If you don't know how to toggle, it's essentially you just go to the top right corner, you click on view, and you select side-by-side speaker view, and you can toggle to have the PowerPoint slide to be roughly the same size as the speaker. That way you can see not only the slide, but also me as well, because my whole presentation isn't the slides. A lot of it is going to be me, and I'd like for you to get the most out of that. Recently, I was, like many of you, probably just kind of a little bit bored and decided to do a little bit of television watching online. I was watching a movie called Outcast on Amazon Prime. And it was kind of a, I would say maybe a B movie starring Nicolas Cage, and I wasn't really paying much attention to it. It was just kind of playing in the background. The premise is that there's a ancient warrior, and it's a journey of redemption. And he tries to save a young emperor and the emperor's family. And that's the whole premise of the movie. Halfway through the movie, one of the protagonists is having a conversation with the young emperor. And the conversation stems around what is battle? Because young emperors wanted to learn how to fight, what battle was. And after listening to that passage that they had given, it really made me start to think about how that applied to speaking. And I'm going to show you that passage that was in that movie and then show you the translation. So the passage in the movie was, battle is both craft and art. First, you must learn the craft, then you push past it until action and reaction become instinct, a part of you. For a long time, I've been struggling to try to articulate my views on public speaking, on the skill that a lot of us join Toastmasters to develop. And I felt that this passage really embodied the essence to it. All it needed was a little bit of a tweak. And this is what I tweaked it to. Public speaking is both a craft and art. First, you must learn the craft, then you seek to embody it until skills and strategies become instinct, a part of you. And this philosophy is going to be significantly embodied in a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today. It's this idea that the skill of public speaking isn't just a bunch of skills and strategies just to apply in every aspect of your life in professional, personal areas. It's to transform who you are. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm an entrepreneur, as Wendy mentioned. I'm a professional speaker, martial artist. I've also been a collegiate athletic coach at the University of Toronto, just close to where you are. And I've also been a fitness trainer. And all these professions have significantly influenced me in my career. My Toastmasters journey, my journey in developing this skill started 15 years ago. I'll be honest with you, I'm an introvert. I'm relatively quite shy, and I was not very good at any of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. My journey started when I started my first company. It was a corporate wellness company. And what this company did is we would go into companies within Chicago and we teach their senior executives how to be more effective at their job through health and lifestyle modifications, either to their lifestyle or to their environment. And what we did is every month we conducted a seminar or a workshop. I avoided these like a plague because I was absolutely terrible at these things. It scared me tremendously. Fortunately, my partner Justin was very good at them and he did them all the time. However, there was this one time where he could not make it. And I remember very distinctly that I had to do it. And I got up in front of a group of 40 senior executives. And for 40 minutes, I wasted their time. I wasted their time because I just tried to use my words and my intellect to try to convince them of an idea, of a message. And it failed miserably. It was an awful feeling. And this led me to join Toastmasters, Extreme Toastmasters here in Chicago. At Extreme Toastmasters, I learned the fundamentals, the skills and the strategies, like the get rid of the yeah, let's create some structure. This is how you stand. I learned those things. But I also felt like I needed to transform how I moved my body a lot more, beyond just theory, but really in a practical environment. And this led me to learning improv. And this led me to Second City Training Center here in Chicago, where I paid somebody literally to teach me how to use my face and my body to get my message across. And then after that, I started working with a professional coach to teach me good structure. And after all these three things, the Toastmasters, the improv, and the working with a coach, I could give a pretty good seminar. However, it was when I started my next business where I invented a product, which Wendy had mentioned a little bit earlier, the exercise device, that I truly realized all the different applications and avenues where the skills of public speaking directly apply. Very seldomly did I actually give speeches. It was more for trade shows, creating social media videos, having meetings, giving pitches to investors, creating all sorts of video applications to different contests. All these different situations that I had never thought about before, that's where these skills came into effect, came into use. And it is those skills that I'm going to share with you today. In my presentation, how to be a confident communicator in the new normal, where we're going to show you some strategies to bridge the gap between where you were just 1 year ago, just doing largely face-to-face presenting, to the new normal, where it's going to be a hybrid between that face-to-face and learning how to conduct meetings, give pitches, sell, and even present online as well. And this is what you're going to learn. You're going to learn 5 strategies that will teach you how to connect with anyone in any setting, whether it's online or virtual. And we're going to take inspiration from 5 different occupations. We're going to take a learning lesson from a product developer, a solopreneur, a documentarian, an entertainer, and ultimately, a martial artist. However, throughout the whole course of what I'm sharing with you, there's going to be 2 fundamental undertones that connects everything together. And the first is this: your audience's brain, literally the moment you start to speak, starts to get tired because it starts running on a treadmill. So the longer you speak, the more complicated it is, the more boring it is, the more information you dump on them, the quicker their body or their mind begins to fatigue. And then when they fatigue, they'll check out. The second is from a physical perspective. The longer that they sit there listening to you, and they've probably been on many presentations throughout the course of the day, their body is going to start to hurt. Their back is going to hurt, their shoulders are going to hurt, their legs are going to hurt. Many of them are going to have Zoom fatigue. Their eyes are going to be tired, and they're going to shut off the camera or just completely start ignoring you. And so when mental fatigue connects with physical fatigue, you're going to lose your audience's attention. And when you do that, well, then your message is not going to get across because unfortunately, they're not going to be able to connect. Therefore, today, we're going to also have 2 breaks. And those 2 breaks are going to give you the opportunity to rest, recover. They're both going to be 5 minutes in length. You can walk away, or during that time, if you choose to stay behind, I'm going to be sharing with you 2 techniques, one at each break, that focuses on a different way to calm your nerves. The first one is going to be a breathing technique to calm your nerves. And the second one is a physical movement approach to calming your nerves before presentation. That's because that's a big struggle that many people have. So those are the things we're going to cover today. Let's begin. But as we begin, the first thing I always like to find out is who is here. So on that note, I'm going to ask 5 of you to answer within probably 30 to 45 seconds who you are and why are you here. Let's start with Jennifer. Jennifer, Maggie, please. If you could unmute yourself and say why you're here and who you are and why you're here.
My name is Jennifer McGee. I'm a Division E Director with District 60. I take every opportunity to take on these trainings. I think this is a great opportunity to learn more about the online forum. Not only am I a Toastmaster, I work full-time in customer service, so communication is very key. And as well, I do also direct sales in different companies as well. So this is always applicable there as well.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Sorry for mispronouncing your name, your last
That's
name.
okay.
Sales and customer service. Mr. Erskine Boyce. Again, the second name I made incorrect today, but can you please tell me why you're here and your name?
That's okay, John. Actually, it's pronounced Boyce, Erskine Boyce. And the reason I'm here is anytime I see a talk or conference or whatever on improving my speaking skills, I always like to join because I feel I can always gain some additional knowledge.
I see. Well, thank you very much. May I ask Amina, Miss Amina?
Hi, John. My name is Amina Banji. I am a member of the Ajax Pickering Toastmasters.
You're on mute, Amina.
Hi, John. My name is Amina Banji. I am a member of the Ajax Pickering Toastmasters Club. I thought this was a very relevant topic because it's applicable to anybody, no matter where they are in their journey, both within Toastmasters and outside. I am in the human resources field, and a lot of what I do, both within Toastmasters and in my career, requires me to have a lot of confidence in my leadership skills, in my public speaking skills. And I thought that this was something that is relevant for all of us to learn, regardless of which aspects of our lives we use it in. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Amina. Professional development. I'll ask one other person, Louise Bark.
Hi, John. I'm here because I joined Toastmasters about 10 years ago, and I figure you can never stop learning. And I thought this sounds like a perfect tool to learn, especially in our new normal of now being a lot of time online. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuous development. There's a nice theme amongst everyone. Thank you for sharing. Let's jump into the next section where I get more feedback from everybody. We're going to answer these 2 questions. What makes a bad presentation? What makes a good presentation? And we're going to start with Arthur. Arthur, in all the face-to-face presentations you've been in, maybe virtual presentations you've been at, what is your pet peeve? Something that makes you annoyed or you think is something that bothers you, that makes them not so good? Go ahead.
For me, John, will be, I always look for that hook question. If I don't see that, you kind of start to tune out over time. Yes.
No hook question. So I almost lost you at the beginning. Okay, good to know. Bruce Lang,
Yes.
What makes a bad presentation to you?
Wearing light colored shirts against a light colored background. So I'm glad you took my advice.
I did. We're going to call that background and poor choice of clothing.
Okay.
Bruce was at another presentation I gave, and I was trying to be festive wearing a summer shirt, and I essentially blended into the background because it was like an orange color. Good lesson learned. Excellent. Iona, what's something that drives you crazy about a presentation? What makes a bad presentation?
When a speaker begins with, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you see me? And especially on Zoom, it's so annoying. I wish they would do a sound check before they began.
Okay. Poor preparation. We'll call that poor preparation. Let's get 2 more. I'm going to ask Chris Nelson.
something that doesn't engage the audience's interest, whether it's a topic that's not relevant or a topic that's so buried in itself you can't get the point.
Okay. Well, let's call that too much fluff. Too much fluff.
Okay.
As I'm writing these down, I'm taking notes and I'm editing my presentation as we go, so I don't lose all of you. Let's get one last one. Pushpa Patel, are you there, Pushpa? No, no Pushpa. All right, one more. Oh, there you are, Pushpa. There you are.
I'm here. I'm here. No, I don't like it when the preparation is not there. Proper preparation I need.
Okay, poor prep. Well, we'll add that here, poor prep again. I'll give you four more that many of you who've seen me present before are big pet peeves. These are pet peeves that I hear from a lot of groups that I've spoken to that they complain about. One's called presentation karaoke. It's where it's a bunch of bullet points and people just read everything. Another one is when people speak in a monotone voice, they sound like this the entire time. No voice fluctuation. No presence on screen. No presence on screen. You don't know if they're alive. And the last one is a data dump. And this is something that people in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math, are guilty of. Oftentimes, for good intentions, you feel that you need to give people as much information as you possibly can. But remember that picture that I showed you at the beginning, the brain running on a treadmill? The more data you give them, more complicated it is, the quicker they tune out. They can't process it all. If you're programming a computer, that's great. But humans, you got to be a little bit more careful and strategic in what you present. All right, on the opposite side, Wendy, what makes a great presentation?
Sorry about that. The presenter engaging the audience.
Engaging. It's kind of like they're actually there for a presentation versus watching a YouTube video that they could technically watch at any period of time. All right. We're going to ask Erskine, what's something that makes you, that's a description of a good presentation to you? Mr. Boyce, we can't hear you.
Good opening and a good closing.
Okay, good opening, good closing. We'll ask two more. Iona, you again, please.
I love the use of trees in speeches or in presentations because it brings to light what you're going to say. So tell them what you tell them, and then tell them again, and then you've got the point in the speech.
Excellent. Good structure that's easy to follow. Tracy Dwan, what's one more thing?
Okay, I think the presentation either attract audience interest or address audience concern or at least something I can take away, at least one. After my presentation, so I can learn. I feel my time is valued.
I see. Thank you. Interest and practical application. We'll call that interest and practical application. Okay, so this is the whole workshop. Don't do this, do this. Everyone can go home. It's a long build-up for a joke. No, but it's a good insight to get this type of feedback from your peers, because your peers are the ones who are actually going to be watching you speak and present. And for every piece of feedback, there's usually another 5 or 10% of the audience, at least, who thinks the exact same thing. So always keep these things in mind. So let's go forward now that we know a little bit about who's here, about your thoughts about what makes a good and bad presentation, let's go over the 5 different takeaways from today's presentation, the 2 strategies. We'll go back to the PowerPoint. The first person we're going to learn from is the product developer, In 2009, I had my fitness business. I was a personal trainer, and I had a lot of clients, all my clients, in fact, trained inside their homes. I had this one particular client. After his workouts, he and I would spend probably about an hour or 2 hours tinkering in his basements, trying to come up with an invention that would essentially help him feel a little less guilty watching television. It was something that he could sit down in his chair, move a little bit, and he would feel less bad about the whole watching 4 or 5 hours of NFL football each and every day. Over the course of 2 years, we tinkered, and we came up with essentially a good prototype of our product, which at the time was called Hover. It's a seated leg swing. However, one of the things that we realized is that we were just tinkerers. I was a personal trainer at the time, and he was an investment banker. We weren't the appropriate people to focus to developing this appropriately. We needed some experts. So the first person we approached was a mechanical engineer. And the mechanical engineer, they spent a lot of time designing the product to function exactly like we wanted it to. They spent a great deal of time perfecting each and every movement. And they did a tremendously good job. The problem was, or the challenge was, that although it worked really, really well, it didn't look very visually appealing, and it wasn't really sellable to a consumer. So after that, we realized, well, who do we talk to? Well, we have to talk to an industrial designer now. So we went to go and talk to an industrial designer, and we gave them the idea of what our product was, and they came up with a fantastic idea of what our product could look like in an ideal world. And it looked amazing. Anybody would buy it. However, it didn't necessarily function effectively. Until we realized when we combined the 2 disciplines together, we had the mechanical engineer with the industrial designer, that we realized that that is where the secret sauce is. Here is an example. On the one hand side, one was designed by a mechanical engineer. It works really, really well. And the opposite side, our product was designed by an industrial designer. But what we decided to do is we got a product development company to build it all, and we came up with our product. Now, if you want to see our product, you're going to have to go to the website. A little bit of mystery is important, but this is kind of to show you the distinction between mechanics and beauty. And this leads us to our first takeaway. Develop presentations that are both mechanically sound and have an appealing design. Develop presentations that are both mechanically sound and have an appealing design. And here are 4 steps to do that. Clarify, build, simplify, enhance. When I say clarify, and this is in that realm of the mechanical engineer, in the building, the planning, the designing phase, there's 2 real questions that you have to identify. Number 1, who is your audience? Who are they? Are they CEOs? Are they mid-level people within a company? Are they staff? Are they team members? Are they potential investors? Are they male? Are they female? Are they domestic? Are they overseas? What age group are they? What's their education level? These are the type of questions that a marketer would figure out or try to figure out in order to cater their message to ensure that it hits the right target. The second question you then ask is, what is the one message? You have to clarify the one message that you want to get across to your audience, whether it's get them to think a little bit differently, or in most cases in the professional world, it's to take a specific action. Oftentimes in the business world, it's to take a step based on your recommendation. What recommendation and what step do you want them to take from what you've just told them? And that's what you have to clarify at the very beginning. The second step you have to take is you have to build your presentation. It's very similar to what Iona said a little bit earlier. You have to have good structure. She said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you just told them. And a very simple structure, which you learn in Toastmasters and you see in virtually any type of Hollywood movie or an advertisement, is you just have a power beginning, a useful center where you give all the information that you need to, and then you have a powerful takeaway. And in the beginning, I challenge you to do these 3 things. At the beginning and opening, you have to start with power. And there's different ways you can start. You can start with a quote. You can start with a statistic, start with a story. You can start with a picture, a very interesting picture up in the background can stimulate people's minds before you even begin to speak. It kind of creates the ambiance and the setting. The thing to think about when you create a very powerful beginning is to capture their attention right off the bat. And then the middle, you tell them what you're going to tell them and follow Iona's advice and take 3 key points. If you're selling a product, let's say, what is the product? Why is it better than the competition? Where can you purchase it? Maybe those are the 3 points that you decide to build your presentation around, and then you put your supporting information underneath that. And then after that, you have a powerful close. Tell them what you want them to do. Do you want them to take a specific action? Do you want them to come to your website? Do you want them to embrace a new habit? Do you want them to buy something from you? You have to be very, very clear at the end what you want them to do. Or if you don't want them to take a specific action, just tell them the idea, reinforce the idea that you want to hit home with them. And that's how you give a powerful ending. So the first 2 steps, clarify and build, that's the mechanical engineer. Let's now focus on the industrial designer, which is the simplify and the enhance. The next is, once you have the body of your presentation done, right, you've built it, now you have to kind of think like an industrial designer, and you want to make it beautiful. And at the same time, you also want to think like a copywriter. And you want to think about, what can I cut out that doesn't further what I'm trying to get across? And a good rule of thumb to do this is to cut out about 25% of what you're trying to get across. Try to cut out 25%, and if you can get close to that, great. You've already saved your audience some time, and your message is going to be much more succinct and much clearer. What are words that you can use that capture larger ideas or larger sentence in much less time or much more powerful? That's where simplifying becomes so important. And then the last step is to enhance. You've clarified who your audience is. You've clarified what your one message is. You've built your structure, opening, middle, end. You've simplified it. And now you just want to enhance it. This is where you have a structure in front of you, and you kind of sprinkle in little elements that give it a little bit more vibrance, that bring your presentation alive. You're like, I'm going to put a little humor here. I may put an interaction with the audience here. I may put a quote in here from a famous person that adds a little bit more credibility to what I'm trying to get across. Those are the things that you kind of think about at the end, and you kind of sprinkle them in. Maybe even a story. You put a story somewhere in there that's ideally ties everything together. Those are the 4 steps to crafting a presentation that you can learn from the product developer. At this point, let's take some questions. Chris is going to be taking the questions, and if you want to chat it out, or if you want to raise your hand, Chris will call you out.
We don't have questions in the chat just yet, but let's give that a moment or 2. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or I will be watching for the raised hands. Michael, did you have a question?
I do. There's some great points brought up here, and identifying your audience is so important. When we're going to a Zoom meeting, sometimes it's difficult to find the scope of your audience. As someone who's going in to do, let's say, a workshop like this, how do you get a feel for who your audience is going to be? Because it can be quite diverse. And I think this is a challenge as far as communicating the message that you wish to communicate.
Sure. There's a couple of things that you do, and generally both are done well in advance of the presentation. And there's got to be some commonality amongst all your audience. Maybe it's the age group of the audience. Maybe it is the one thing that ties them all together, like the one passion. For example, in this audience, it's public speaking. It's pretty straightforward. That becomes the primary tie-in. It just depends on who it is. I would ask to speak with somebody in the audience. If you have a connection within the organization, you book an engagement, a workshop, ask for 1 or 2 participants within the group, and they can give you insight from the inside. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think asking those rhetorical questions does give you a sense of who your audience is. Thank you.
Sure, sure.
We do have a question. Sorry, I need to I'm trying to catch questions in here with other conversation. Strategy 1 from your slide. I believe that was the S. John, can you restate that for our viewers, please?
Strategy 1, you mean what the main objective was?
Yes.
Oh, I don't have it memorized. Let's go back and see. There's another strategy. Don't memorize your speech. And then sometimes you got to go back and check. There it is. Develop presentations that are both mechanically sound and have an appealing design. So that'll be a good segue to jump into our second point, seeing that we're already back on the PowerPoint. And the second point is to think like a solopreneur, to think like a solopreneur. And there's a big difference between a solopreneur and an entrepreneur. Generally speaking, they both start their own businesses, but oftentimes an entrepreneur has a fair amount of capital and they have access to a bunch of specialists who can help them with different elements of their business. Particularly in any business, two of the most important functions are sales and marketing, and they often have people who can help them with that. A solopreneur, by mere definition of the fact that it's solo, has to do all those things together. And that is an important kind of mindset to embrace, and especially in this new normal, that you have to become the sales and marketing team of yourself. You are the product, whether it's to catch the attention of your employers, perhaps it's to catch the attention of a potential employer if you are looking for a job, putting information out on social media, creating your own content, creating video resumes, all those things. You have to become your own sales and marketing team of yourself, because if you don't speak for yourself, nobody else will. This was a brutal lesson that I learned at the beginning of the pandemic. I had a whole bunch of in-person speaking engagements booked. And as soon as the pandemic hit, essentially they all got canceled or they got pushed off till 2022. And then all of a sudden I found myself racing to create an online presence, a much more online presence where everybody was on social media, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and starting to put my face out there in video and going on to webinars, anywhere I could, so people knew I existed and knew my expertise. You may not be seeking to do the exact same thing because you may work for an organization, but it doesn't hurt to keep looking at developing your own personal brand. So that leads us to the second strategy, is to develop a personal brand image and seek to always be selling and marketing yourself. And here are the 3 steps to do that. Number 1, build a virtual lair. Number 2, learn the skills. And number 3, pick a uniform. We're going to start with a virtual lair. As you can see from this image, this is my workspace. On one side, I have a desk where I sit and I do my work, and then I have a standing station. As this is becoming the new normal, it behooves you to not kind of fly by night and just put a whole bunch of books underneath your computer when you need to stand or when you need to present. I would challenge you to create a virtual lair that you can just kind of shift from sitting to standing with. Here are the 5 components. Number 1, make sure you have good lights. Have a light at 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock. If you can, 1 light will be sufficient. A ring light works really well. Have an elevated platform. If you look in that picture, what I have underneath my laptop is actually a telescoping stand, and at the top is a projector stand. And that's what I'm using right now. And so the camera that's on top of it is literally eye to eye. And so that's why I can create this connection with you. Next is to ensure that you have a wireless keyboard, something like this. So it doesn't look like you're typing like this in front of everybody, right? You often see that, a wireless keyboard, and have it lower. Here's another thing that's not in there. I don't know if you can see that. It's a sawhorse. On the sawhorse, I have my wireless keyboard and my wireless mouse. That way, it looks like I have full control, but you can't tell. Next is to ensure that you have a good quality mic. If you're doing a lot of presentations and webinars, and as Bruce can attest, one of the things I really promote is standing when you do those official things. Having a lavalier mic that's connected to your laptop, like I have here, that has a long rope, allows you to move around and get your message across. Oftentimes when you move away, the voice drowns out. And as I mentioned earlier, if the listener's brain has to really struggle to understand what you're saying, then unfortunately they're going to drown out. And this leads to a kind of a good segue. If you are English as a second language, ESL, one of your challenges is to get people to understand what you're saying. And you don't want to have the quality of your audio add to your challenges. So it behooves you to definitely invest in an external mic that'll ensure that your voice comes across clearly, and then practice the skills that you need to learn to be able to come across a little bit more clearer in what you're speaking, how you're speaking. Things like speaking a little bit slower, enunciating your words, and using pauses. And a great way to practice for those of you who are ESL, learning to try to communicate a little bit more clearly, is to take The Economist magazine. It's a good magazine, and read the different segments out loud and try to enunciate different aspects. It's going to give you a good idea of how short, well-crafted thoughts are put together, and it'll give you plenty of practice to practice speaking. That was a segue. And then we're going to come back to the controlled, the fifth step, which is the controlled background. Use your background as either part of your, make sure that it's part of your message and it doesn't detract from your message. When you watch a president or prime minister speak, generally they have flags behind them. It's there for a reason. It's to add effect. But then when you see a really bad presentation where someone really isn't paying attention, it actually detracts from it. You actually see those on CNN or Fox News or CBC, anywhere, as a comedic outtake because there's something embarrassing in the background. I challenge you to either strategically create a good background, or at the very least, as Wendy has, blur it out or use a clear white wall as your background. Think about it as an extension of your shirt, of your clothing. So those are the 5 steps to create a virtual lair. The next are the three skills to develop. Number 1 is video editing. Second is copywriting. And third is slide design. Video editing is so important because if you're going to craft, you want to stand out in front of the crowd. And one of the things, as I mentioned, a solopreneur has to do everything themselves. And instead of having to pay for pricey videographers, which is great if you can afford it, but otherwise build your own videos, maybe your marketing videos, maybe they're your job resumes, you're creating a video resume, maybe it's a pitch, you're pitching another company, a B2B pitch. Create a video and do that. And you can edit it yourself. Use Adobe Premiere or Final Cut. Those are 2 great tools to learn how to develop. And you can learn the skills on Udemy. Download a program and do that there. Next is copywriting. Learn copywriting. That way, that will not only help you craft presentations that are concise, your message is much clearer, but it'll also help you with the copy on your videos, on your messaging, so they're much more catchy. Because remember, people's attention spans are very, very short. And if it's too complicated or it's too wordy, too lengthy, then people are just going to ignore the whole thing. And the third is slide design. One of the biggest complaints that you hear from a lot of speakers or a lot of audiences is that the individual's PowerPoint slides are just too confusing. There's a woman by the name of Nancy Duarte. She's out of Silicon Valley. She's a presentation design engineer. She's the guru of the whole field. And she came up with this way of thinking that whenever you create a slide, ideally think about it in the sense that you have to be able to tell what the slide is trying to tell you within 3 seconds. Think about a highway billboard. As you're driving, you see the billboard, you want to pretty much get the insight of what is on that billboard right away. If it's got way too much text, there isn't any visuals, then chances are people aren't going to really catch on. Also realize that when you are speaking, when you're presenting, the audience can either do one of 2 things. They can listen to you speak, or they can read what's on your bullet point. And chances are they're going to read what's on your bullet points. So really think about that. The slide should be an accompaniment to your message. Just make them a great visual support mechanism for what you're trying to get across. And again, Udemy is a great place to learn how to make good visuals. Lastly, pick a uniform. I have the same uniform that I wear each and every time, except that one time Bruce saw me where I was wearing a red one and I tried to be a little bit more festive. And he called me out. It's memorable. I either wear the blue shirt, the dress shirt, like you see me here for professional groups, or if I don't know really what the makeup of the group is going to be, but if it's going to be a bunch of entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley types, then I'm going to be wearing the t-shirt because that connects me more. This is goes back to the idea of knowing who your audience is. Questions?
We do have
Please
one
pass it to
already
Chris.
in the chat. And that is as to mics and cameras. What brand do you use? What do you recommend, John?
I use, this is called Moeno mic, M-O-E-N-O, and I use an external webcam. The best webcams are Logitech, I would say. But generally any camera that's over $75, webcam that's over $75 is going to be a good camera. It's going to beat the camera that you have on your laptop.
Okay. And what about mics? Is there a brand you'd recommend for that?
Moeno is a good, I'm using a Moeno
Oh.
lavalier right now.
Okay.
M-O-E-N-O.
Okay. Excellent. Any other questions? Not seeing them in chat. Michael looks like he's got a hand raised again, or is
Yeah.
that just still?
Just a quick question. I think you brought up a great point, John. The problem with my video today, and it was with my audio that finally got sorted out. The guy that sold me my computer is like $700, but he said, here's a great $20 webcam. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So I really endorse your point, like spend the money. Like this thing has caused me more issues than my $700 computer. And this is why I'm going in to get it uninstalled on Monday. And you bring it, that's such a good point.
Well, thank you. Yeah, definitely. If you can invest in some better quality things, thinking long-term, because this is going to be something that you'll probably continue to do, whether it's with local teams or working with remote teams or just having to do some virtual calls.
Sure. We have more equipment type questions. Your elevated platforms and your wireless keyboard. Recommendations there, or how did you come up with those?
How did I come up with it? It just seemed like it made sense. That's how I came up with it. A lot of trial and error. However, this is just my, what is it called? The keyboard from my Mac desktop, which I connected to my MacBook Air. You can do the same thing if you have a PC. You just get a wireless PC keyboard, and then you just plug it into the USB port, the wireless mount, and that'll connect both.
Perfect.
Same with the mouse.
Okay. And the platforms?
The platform is how can I say? Well, one is a sawhorse. So I just went to the Home Depot to get the sawhorse. Just need a flat platform. But the second is I got it on Amazon. It's a telescoping projector stand. There is no particular brand. Just Google projector stand and try to get one that's over about a meter and a half, I would say. Make sure you know the height of it, because if it's too low, it's not going to be any value to you. You want to have it nice and high. This one, I'm about 5'11". This one goes to about here on me if I wanted to raise it all the way.
Okay, good things to know. We have another question. Agnes, did you want to ask something?
Oh, yeah. Hi, John. Hi, everyone. I have a question. John, you mentioned a good point, the difference between a solopreneur and an entrepreneur. So I'd just like to know, how do you balance, like you don't want to be jack of all trades and you have your expertise like in public speaking, and you really don't want to spend as much time on video editing or some other like a peripheral skills. So how do you suggest us to balance those two?
I understand. So how can I say it? A lot of the skills that I'm sharing with you, I developed not to become a professional speaker. I developed it for other businesses, to give presentations for a corporate wellness number, to create social media videos, to sell a product, to be better able to communicate at trade shows and things like that. So the importance of developing these skills is to be able to create content and become more valuable to whatever organization you belong to. I wouldn't look at it just about being a way to self-promote yourself. It's just developing tools that will make you more of an asset within your own company. And if you look at it from that perspective, I think you're much more likely to embrace it than rather viewing it through the lens of, oh, it's just meant to help someone become a better public speaker. What I'm trying to share with you are also kind of ideas on how to essentially start your own business or be your own business, be your own brand?
It looks like that's all we have for questions right now, John.
Excellent, good. This is the perfect time to take our first break. It's going to be a 5-minute break. This is a mind break. I learned from somebody to look at puppies and smile. Feel free to turn your cameras off for about 5 minutes. For those of you who want to stay, we're going to do what's called box breathing. And box breathing is a way to relax your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight nervous system, and engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relaxation. And it's something that you do right before you present to help reduce nervousness. However, I'm going to ask you to stand to do this as well, just because that's going to give your backs a little bit of break as well. So this is how it's going to work. For a count of 4, you're going to breathe in deep through your nose. And then for a count of 4, you're going to breathe out through your mouth for a count of 4. And we're going to do that 4 times through. I'll lead you through it. Okay. And just listen to the sound of my voice and I'll tell you when we're done. Close your eyes and inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out. 1, 2, 3, 4, and in deep. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2. Back in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last one, nice and deep. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And rest. Go ahead. Go ahead and take a moment. Relax. We'll be back in a few minutes. Chris is going to put up the sign when we're done. When we get to the section on, what's it called? Interacting with the audience and keeping them engaged, you'll see kind of why this is important. The breathing is important. To getting everyone to take a break is important as well. For those of you who jumped on, you just jumped on right when we're taking a break. So we actually do have a workshop going on. Jennifer, how did you find the breathing exercise?
It's good. It's just a reminder, you know, you breathe all the time, but you forget that it's important that it supports everything that you do.
Yeah.
So it's a good opportunity to just center yourself and just start from a fresh perspective. It's good.
Yeah, clear the cobwebs out.
And I like when you said stand up, because we spend so much time sitting down now.
Yeah.
That you don't realize that you might be uncomfortable, or that you're not breathing properly, or that you can't breathe as deep when you sit as when you stand.
Absolutely. Constricted.
Yeah, absolutely. Big difference.
We do have one short question from one of our attendees as to whether a webcam camera is always better than your laptop or built-in camera.
I can't say that for sure, because there are some amazing computers out there. So I would get the feedback from your peers. If you're about to give a seminar, you're going to have a talk, call in with some friends and ask them how you come across on camera, how you look and how you sound. And ask them specifically to see your clarity as well as your visual clarity as well as your audio clarity. Sometimes the challenge isn't necessarily the camera. It could be your internet connection. It's generally a good rule of thumb to plug in your Ethernet when you are going to have a presentation. That way the signal doesn't get interrupted.
And we are at 5 minutes now, John.
Excellent. Well, we'll continue. And as people join us back in, they'll catch up. We're going to go into the next step, which is the documentarian. The documentarian. I don't have a story for this, but we're going to jump right into the lesson. And it's to purposely create and include design elements that are interactive, engaging, and visually appealing. And here are 4 ways to do that. The first one is to interact. In elementary school, junior high school, a lot of the teaching was done in one direction. Adults learn differently. They generally learn experientially. They learn through interaction and dialogue. It's a little bit challenging sometimes to do through Zoom, but the most you can do to incorporate that in, the more you're going to get your audience to be with you throughout your whole journey, what the message you're trying to get across. Ask them questions, call them out by name, make them feel more like they're participating in what you're trying to say. And simply asking open-ended questions is a great way to do it. The second is to make visually appealing slides. If you think about a high school core class you once took or college class you once took, and the instructor may not have been very engaging. They just stood behind the lectern and they talked about perhaps Confederation, Canadian Confederation. And that was the topic that they talked about for an hour. They just stood there and talked. And then on the other side, imagine going on to Vice News, or perhaps the CBC creates a documentary on Confederation, but then they start using all sorts of videos and voices and actors and just all sorts of different things thrown at you to keep your attention. That's the difference between something that's very dry versus something that really engages the senses. And that's kind of what a documentarian teaches us to do. And visually appealing slides is an easy way to kind of do that. Traditionally, a lot of slides are very boring. It's just maybe a graph and 8 or 9 or 10 bullet points that people just end up using as something that they read. I challenge you to, instead of having one slide with 9 bullet points, spread it out. Maybe you can have 8 or 9 slides, each one with a specific bullet point, and then have a giant image that supports that bullet point as well. People don't have a problem with PowerPoint. People have a problem with PowerPoints that are dull and boring, uninspiring, and provide way too much information. The next is to get your audience to change their physicality. And it goes back to the message that I told you a little bit earlier at the beginning, is when someone sits for a very long period of time, their body is starting to get uncomfortable. And changing physicality doesn't mean you got to get them all to stand up, although that's a great one to do, because then all of a sudden you get more oxygen going to their brain. But something as simple as getting them to raise their hand, physically moving, physically raising their hand, that wakes them up and gets them a little bit more engaged. It jolts them. And speaking of getting them to raise their hand, it's very good to mirror the behavior that you want to do. If you have a small enough audience that you're speaking to, look at the screen and say, I can see you, I can see you, raise your hands, raise your hands. Urge them on. It's another way to ensure that they know that you're not only interacting with them, you're also getting to change their physicality. It's a double bonus. It's an extra bonus in terms of interacting. And then the last thing is to take breaks. I don't know if you've ever been in a workshop or a seminar, whether it was face-to-face or in a Zoom setting, where the person just spoke for 2 hours. Can't possibly follow that. There's a reason why you get to decide to watch a YouTube video and decide to switch videos after 5 seconds, because attention spans are so short, it has to be engaging and interesting. No one will ever get mad at you for shortening up your presentation. They will get mad at you for wasting their time, for going on and on and on and on. That's why, going back to one of the messages I said about simplifying, see if you can cut out 25% of what you're trying to say. Well, here's another little bit of a tangent. If you find yourself doing the presentation karaoke and you have a lot of bullet points and you're not a graphic designer, or you don't feel the need to develop that skill, cancel your presentation, send the document to your counterpart, have them read it, and then jump on a meeting with them and discuss the document. That way, they don't have to sit through it. You're more comfortable. You don't have to learn design, and the objective is achieved. So those are 4 ways to think like a documentarian to get your message across. Really think that the modern audience needs engagement, needs interaction. Any questions about that?
It doesn't look like we have any specific ones in the chat right now. I don't see any raised hands at this moment.
Okay, then we will move on.
Looks like you've covered it all so far.
Ah, good. I hope. Everyone, please remember, these are, as that quote said, this is an art and a craft. Everything that I'm sharing is from my perspective, my experience. Take what you want, ignore the rest, build your own. So the next person that we're going to take a lesson from is the entertainer. And this is a picture of me at improv. And that's me over there, right above the word improv. And the reason why I had to take improv is because I had 2 challenges when I first started my professional career, really, entering into the workforce after leaving college. In college, I studied economics. So it was very dry stuff generally that I studied. And my first 2 jobs out of college were in banking. I worked at CIBC and I worked at CIBC World Markets. And that environment was very conservative in nature, but it suited my personality at the time. I was very stoic, very serious. And then from a cultural perspective, I'm half Japanese. I grew up in my mother's household. It was just a single mother, and it was a heavy Japanese influence on me. And that culture is very stoic. You don't show emotion. You're very serious. You don't get out in front of the camera. You don't do anything like that. And that's what was ingrained into me. And when I first started speaking, first started presenting, it became very difficult for me. It was very difficult for me to do anything more than just use my words and my intellect to try to get my message across. And that's why I had to go to improv to literally pay somebody to teach me to get out of my own way, to get out, to open myself up, to use my body language, my facial expressions to help get my message. And the reason why I share this with you is that maybe some of you go, you know what? I'm not a very gregarious person. I'm more of a reserved. I generally don't use my body language. But you can change how you are. You know, a lot of who you are the result of every decision that you've made, every choice of action in terms of what you wanted to learn that you wanted to make. This is another choice that you can make. You can transform how you come across. Because you have to remember, you want to be able to use all your tools available to you to help the audience understand the message you're trying to get across. So look at it from a philanthropic perspective, or not a philanthropic, an altruistic perspective. It's not about you, it's about your audience, to ensure that they get the message that you want them to understand. And so you want to use all the tools at your disposal. And if right now you only have the skills to use your words and your intellect, well, you're really not helping the audience as much as you could by developing more skills that will ensure the audience gets it. Because if they get it, that ultimately benefits you back. And so that's just another way of thinking about it. And so here are 4 ways to make sure that your audience is better able to understand what you're trying to say on top of the presentation that you designed earlier. And it's the delivery aspect of it. It's to use your body, your face, and your voice and your stories to get your message across. In my short rapid learning sessions, which I've been doing at a lot of Toastmasters clubs, the one thing that I tell people to do is just to stand when you give formal presentations or you conduct a meeting. That simple act will ensure that you are able to use your gestures and use your body to help get your message across. If you are seated the entire time, you're not going to be able to do that. You can use a little bit of your hand gestures maybe, but this really frees you up. So I would challenge you to stand in every situation that you get. And think about it also this way. This comes from my coaching background, my sports coaching background. You perform like you practice. And as we all know, we're not going to be in this, how can I say? We're not going to be in the virtual world the entire time. It's going to be a hybrid. So we're going to have to get up. We're going to have to go back to standing in front of a group and speaking. And if we spent the last 8 months, 10 months sitting like this, it's going to be difficult. We're still back to square one with our challenge of getting up in front of the group. In many respects, I truly believe that sitting down and presenting right now on Zoom is very much similar to standing behind a lectern and speaking in front of a group. It's protective because everybody else is doing it's protective. But this is your challenge. Get out from behind the lectern, get up from the chair and practice and speak like this. You can always go down, you can always sit. It's a challenge to come back up. So I would challenge you to do that. Use your body. Second, use your facial expressions. Use them to help convey your message and make sure they match the words that you're saying. Someone in my family just died this week. You see what I said? My facial reactions didn't match what I said. Make sure your facial reactions match what you're trying to say. Use your voice as a tool. Raise it, lower it. Put more presence in it. Command it. You can use it as a tool to help get your message across. If you choose not to ever stand up, it becomes one of the only tools that you have. And a great way, as I mentioned earlier, to practice is to get a magazine, a good magazine, and read it. Try practicing changing your vocal variety in reading that. Emphasize certain words. Speak a little bit quieter in other words. That's just a powerful way to get a lot of practice. And then lastly, use stories to help get your message across. And this has probably been harped on enough in Toastmasters and in just popular culture about the importance of stories. But you have to, I would challenge you to embrace it as a powerful tool to ensure you get your message across, not just for giving speeches, but to ensuring the audience gets what you're saying. I'll give you an example. I used to work at a baseball academy in the Dominican Republic. I worked there for 2 years. I would travel to the Dominican Republic for 1 week out of every 4, and I would work with their athletes, Dominican and Cubans, and help prepare them for Major League Baseball's international draft. And that happened every year. And training there is pretty severe. These athletes live at the training facility, and they train about 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, literally every day almost, week after week, year after year, until they sign, or usually what happens is they don't get signed and they get sent home. And this becomes very, very grueling and very taxing. And we needed to figure out a way to motivate these young kids. And as coaches, we could say, yeah, do this, do that, do this, but it really didn't stick. But then we had this great idea to pretend we were Sammy Sosa. Sammy Sosa is a very famous Dominican baseball player. And we came across an article that he had written. And sure, we embellished it a little bit. And we had the article like this. And we said, hey, gentlemen, we had translators pronounce it. Sammy Sosa said that his secret to becoming very successful, that no matter how tired he got, he trained each and every day. This is what his life was like. This is what he ate. This is how he exercised. And that use of story, that use of Sammy Sosa's story helped get the message into the minds of the listeners. So think about it as a tool to ensure that your message gets across if just simply words and ideas and statistics and all that stuff, information is not enough. Any questions about the entertainer?
We do have a question from the chat. How many levels of improv did you do? This member found level 1 not too challenging as an existing Toastmaster. Would it be of value to try more levels?
Sure, I did. I took a 1-year curriculum. It had 6 different, how can I say it? Semesters, essentially. Each semester was 8 weeks in length. And after the first, for the first 3, you just did the classes, and the last 2, there was a performance at the end. So that's how much it took.
Okay, so in that frame, it sounds like you took 6 levels if you were 6 courses in that.
Yeah, it's all basic though. It's all the basic fundamental level. It was more attributed to time and practice, I would say.
Okay, terrific. I don't see any other questions in chat right now, and I don't see any raised hands.
All right, then we're going to jump into the next section. The next section is actually going to be scheduled to be a break, but seeing that we're all here and we just took a break relatively quickly, I'm going to use the opportunity to explain to you how you can physically prepare for a speech, a presentation, if you're nervous, by using your physical body. And this is based on this notion that, or the premise that the stress that you feel right before you speak, when you're feeling nervous, that's That's a physiological response to a mental stressor. It's kind of like the same feeling that a gazelle feels like when they see a lion in the jungle. All of a sudden, it feels fear. It gets a whole host of hormones flushing through the system, adrenaline, cortisol, and they're ready to run. But the difference between us and the gazelle is ours is just a perceived threat. It's not an actual lion charging on us. But the hormonal response, the stress response is exactly the same. So all of a sudden you have all this adrenaline in your body, all this cortisol in your body, and you're about to present, you feel like a stone or you feel like you're shaking because you have all this energy, and then you muddle through it. After your presentation, what do you end up doing? You shake your body out, you're like, ah, or you go for a walk to flush it out. The strategy that I'm going to share with you today is to go, okay, if how I get rid of that cortisol, how I get rid of that adrenaline after my speech is by moving my body, maybe I can use it ahead of it as essentially to inoculate myself against it. So I know I'm going to get really aroused from this event. I'm going to get nervous. So I'm going to start jogging on the spot prior. I'm going to go outside, do some steps. If I'm wearing something dressy, maybe I step to the side just like so. Whatever I can to move my muscles so that I get a bit of a dopamine shot. I feel a little bit good, like I'm drugging myself. I'm also giving my stress hormone cortisol essentially a way to flush it out of my system. And this is how you prepare to present by moving your body. So I challenge you, if you have a big presentation that you're coming up with, combine the two things that I shared with you. The box breathing, calm your nervous system that way through the breathing. And then second, move your body physically so that you're much more relaxed and a lowered sense of arousal going into your presentation. So those are two very powerful ways to use your body as a tool to relax you. All right, we're going to jump into the fifth and final point, and that is the martial artist. The martial artist. What can we learn from the martial artist? So when I first moved to Chicago about 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, I had never really done any martial arts before. And my girlfriend at the time had convinced me to go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy here in Chicago called the Carlson Gracie Academy. And we were fortunate to have the Carlson Gracie Sr., who's one of the patriarchs of the martial art, still alive and training there. And because of that fact, there were a lot of really heavy hitters in the mixed martial arts world, really tough and intimidating people there, all training together. And the day I went, I got there and I looked around and it just seemed like the most barbaric, this seemed like the most aggressive, the most intimidating place I'd ever been in my life. And it's kind of like the same feeling that, you goes into when you're about to give a speech and you look out to an audience and you just think everybody's there to kill you or to judge you. It's an awful feeling. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to do this. But ultimately, she convinced me to continue going. And then I start to realize, oh, okay, if I just practice these skills, which at the beginning I was terrible at, and I practice it as much as possible, it's going to become more and more easy. And then ultimately, like that quote says, it's going to become instinct. And now I'm at the point where I now instruct others in the martial arts because the movements that were once intimidating when I first got into it are now part of me. I don't think about those moves anymore. And that's essentially the lesson that we learn from the martial artist, is to practice wherever and wherever you can so that public speaking skills become instinct. So you don't always have to think about, oh, I'm going to stand straight. I'm going to get in front of the group and I'm going to not say, yeah, or not use verbal tics. Because if you're going to think about that, chances are you're going to mess up. I hate to say it, because you're going to be so focused on not screwing up your main message that you're not going to be thinking about standing with your shoulders back, and saying the correct things. You're not going to be thinking about what to do right. You're going to be focusing on not screwing up. And here are three things you can do to ensure that you get the proper practice. First and foremost, and many of you probably have already heard this before, is to record yourself as much as you possibly can with your cell phone, your iPad, or your computer, and review it. That's key. It's not the same as looking at a mirror, because a mirror, you don't have the luxury of going back and seeing what you did and seeing what modifications you make. When I gave my first keynote speech in front of 250 people in Baltimore in 2014, it was a 50-minute speech. I practiced probably about 60 times, recording it, practicing it, because I was so nervous. I needed to really, truly internalize what I had. But each and every time I recorded it, I noticed that my presentations got shorter and shorter, cleaner and cleaner, and crisp and crisp. In fact, to this day, I still remember a lot of the stories from that initial presentation. And that's the power of recording yourself and practicing it over and over so you internalize a lot of these things. Second, practice everywhere. And this goes back to this notion of developing it to become instinct. So one of the things we talk about in terms of what is the best position to stand when you're speaking in front of a crowd, in front of a group, what is the most powerful position? The most powerful position, some people might say with your hands by your hips, just like so, it's the super person. It is not. Some people will say, well, it's probably the military. No, it's not. The most powerful position is ironically the most uncomfortable. It's standing with your hands side by side, but it's very, very unnatural. And if you're about to speak in front of a group and you haven't made this your natural position, it's going to be difficult to put yourself in this position. And that's why when you go to the supermarket, instead of having your cell phone in your hand, have your hands by your side. The next time you're socializing with friends, mask on or mask off, depending on the situation, instead of having a drink in your hands, have your hands by your side. This is an example of practicing everywhere. So this becomes instinct. Another great way to practice, and probably one of the most effective for myself to overcome the anxiety and nervousness of speaking to groups and people, because again, this doesn't come naturally, is to start up conversations with strangers. This is something I did a lot when we had face-to-face networking. I would go to networking events. I hate them, but they were great opportunities to strengthen my ability to go up and start talking with somebody, make eye contact, start talking. Because if I could do that, then maybe I could speak with 100 people. And there's nothing at stake at this networking event, so I could just do it over and over and over and over again till it becomes second nature. It's not easy, but now I don't have to think about it. These are examples of how to practice everywhere. And then the third thing I would challenge you is to practice under adverse circumstances. Practice under adverse circumstances. In an ideal world, you'll be in a studio and you'll be speaking, you'll be presenting, things will be quiet, children won't be running, you won't have technical difficulties, you won't hear things on the outside, but that's not what happens. Something generally goes wrong. And it's good to allow those things to happen. If they do, accept and recognize them often, and just use them as ways to strengthen yourself. I'll give you an example. Probably about 2 years ago, I was giving this presentation in front of a large group at a restaurant, and I made the terrible mistake of not telling them where I wanted to stand. And they put me, for some unbelievable reason, right in front of the door to the kitchen. And as I was speaking, the waiters kept coming up behind me, crossing in front of me, and then they would take orders from different people in the audience. Oh my gosh, I just wanted to die and quit. But I thought at that moment, okay, all right, this is going to be, I'll get through this, but it's also going to strengthen me. And then now, anytime, nothing is going to be as bad as that, because I'm ready for any waiter to jump from behind me. So I challenge you to do the same things, even on Zoom. You may have technical problems. That's okay. Work through it, acknowledge it. People are very open to that. They're open. They're very, very forgiving. This is going to be the last section for questions on this topic, and then we'll close, and then we'll open up to full Q&A at the end.
Looks like Wendy's got a raised hand there.
So many good information coming my way. Thank you. My notes are going crazy, even if I am going to watch the recording again. I just wanted to share with you what I do to prepare myself for a contest, a speech contest. I go out into the hallway, I walk up and down, and I sing to myself, "The wheels on the bus go round and round," or "Old MacDonald has a farm," over and over, and it just calms me down. And then I take a deep breath when it's my turn and go. It works for me.
I think I plagiarized your idea because you just described everything I said. So I just followed your lead. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay. Now
think
people
Michael's-
don't know my secrets.
Now we just can't wait to see you again in person, Wendy.
Yeah.
I think Michael's got a question as well, John.
I do. Thanks, John. This is a great presentation. I sing Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. This is probably why I don't win a lot of contests. What I'd like to ask you is, it took me 21 years. It took me half that at least to get comfortable in front of a real audience when we spoke live. Now I find with what we have now with Zoom is a reset. And sometimes I find myself that I'm speaking to a computer and not real people. And I find this to be a real challenge. It hurts my vocal variety, my eye contact and everything, because I still feel like I'm talking to a computer. I don't know if there's any ideas I could get some help on this from anybody.
I think Michael's question was for anybody. Does anybody have anything to chime in? I think Jennifer does.
I think that's where my theater background lends itself to me. You know, that idea that you practice and you pretend there's an audience. So I started out as a dancer as a young girl. I went to theater school and that type of thing. And everything you're saying about improv is so relevant. But I think what I do is I imagine there's people there. So when you're speaking in your spotlight and it's just your camera, I still imagine that I'm seeing people. So that's where you have to get creative and see your crowd and see your audience and build that in. And again, it's a practice, right? And we're not used to that in this environment because in Toastmasters, we always have people in the room and we always have people to speak to and in front of. But that's practice. It's literally just, it's where your imagination comes in or where you see one or two faces, however you want to have your screen so that you can see who you're speaking to. That's how you present it, right? It is a practiced skill. One of the things when Wendy was saying she sings the wheels on the bus, we had a teacher, an acting teacher or singing teacher, what she used to make us do, or one of the guys in the class who couldn't relax himself. We were in portables at the time. She made him run around the portable 4 times. When he came in, he had to do jumping jacks and then stand still with his hands at the side and sing. Because that relaxed everything and it took everything away. So it's whatever works for you. But as far as the crowd, you imagine them there. Like right now we have all of these high paid professional sports people playing to placards in the seats, right? Same kind of thing. We imagine our applause. We have to imagine our crowd too, until we get back into a regular setting.
Interesting. Thank you, Jennifer. That's a fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea. Does anybody else have any ideas for Michael?
John, I think Tracy's waiting to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, hi, John. It's a fantastic topic. It's really very practical. We can take away tomorrow. But I have one particular question regarding how you overcome your nervous about a different audience. I found myself as a Toastmaster, I am very relaxed during in Toastmaster session. And I treat people, audience like my friend, a group of friends. So I don't have a lot of nervous. But when I come back to work, and because and my nature of my work have to report senior executive, and that moment somehow I sometimes I even lost my thought logic. I know this is nervous because you don't want to make any mistake. You want to be very concise. You want to get the point. Somehow it's still hard for me to this is many years of the practice. I still have this kind of fears. I don't know what's your recommendation or your suggestion how when you target a different audience and you can still use your these skills, what you share these skills, just more practical to target a different audience when you talk. This is what I'm not. Maybe not directly to your this section, but this is just overall my question. I think I would like to get your advice.
Sure, I'll be very straightforward. I get honestly sick to the stomach before every presentation. And because this group, even this group, I've only met a few of you before, and it's just, I don't feel like it's very easy. So I do all the skills, the exercising, the move before. I went out for a jog earlier today, and then I did the breathing exercise. I did the music. I've also been speaking wherever and whenever I can. It's making the choice between watching Netflix or spending an hour going to a club and giving a presentation. All of you can actually do that. Take this opportunity while everybody's on Zoom, travel around the world, offer to give a speech in whatever country you are. It'll do three things. One, it'll train you in the diversity training that's so important right now because you'll be speaking to new audiences. It'll teach you how to, especially if you go overseas, how to be much more clear and concise in what you're saying and learn to enunciate more in front of foreign audiences. And number three, it'll give you the practice. Nothing will give you more strength than practice. And oftentimes and this is not to take away from the amount of practice you've done, Tracy, I don't know how much you have, but oftentimes when people are in Toastmasters, they maybe speak once every month, and then sometimes they'll do one table topics, and that's kind of it, one or two. I would challenge you to really think about figuring out a way to practice every single day, and that's what's going to develop the confidence.
Okay, thank you.
And it could be going networking, right? You just go network.
I think Agnes is waiting next.
Oh, hi. I think that's my question, or not question, like my comment is related to Michael's question. I think another thing what I can think of is that dress well, even though we're not seeing the audience. I think it's part of what John, you mentioned, is to get ourselves ready. It's like our mentally are ready, then obviously like physically, or when we're really presenting, even though we're not seeing the audience, but we're projecting, like what you did in our club. It's like we're not in the same room, but you're projecting your energy to us, to the audience. So I think when we are ready with dress for the presentation, doesn't matter we're seeing the people or not, we'll kind of mentally prepare ourselves to perform better.
Right. Thank you, Agnes. That's absolutely true. You know, the quote that I keep going back, it's not even my quote, about learning the skills and relying on them until it becomes instinct. Yeah, a lot of the things that I'm sharing with you, they aren't instinct for me yet. But here, for example, these are the shoes that I'm wearing because someone taught me from acting, in the acting world, that you put on your shoes, you get into character. And then the clothing is like a uniform. It transforms how you come across. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Navarro. He's the head of he used to be the head of body language training at the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And they did an internal study at Quantico on how the type of clothing affected the agent, how the agents and their decision-making process. They took two groups of agents. One group, they dressed up in business attire, and the other group, they dressed up in SWAT gear, combat gear. And they were both tasked with the same problem: come up with a plan to rescue a little girl. The group that was dressed up in business suits, their plan, open up a line of communications, get on the phone, start negotiating. What do you think the group that was dressed up in military fatigues and combat did? Yeah, right? Wendy punched, Chris laughed. Right, they kicked down the door, and the only difference was the type of clothing that they were wearing. Use that to your advantage. Just that's one strategy or one tactic. I'll just quickly close it up because I want to make sure that I take care of respect of everybody's time. That was the final point. As I close, the last thing I really try to walk away with or leave is to get 2 or 3 people's action step. What are they going to do differently? What are you going to be doing differently after being here today? I'm going to ask Amina. Oh yeah, that's right. If you don't want to be asked, look away like you did in high school. I do the same thing sometimes. Turn off your camera. But if you're here, I'm going to ask you. So Amina, I'm going to ask you, what would you do differently?
Good thing you asked me because I pressed unmute as soon as you asked that question. So I'm all ready for it. I have decided to stand up for my next speech. It's going to be on April the 28th. It's going to be my second HBL speech. And I'm going to, for the first time, stand up during these Zoom meetings and do it. I haven't done it up until now, but I'm sort of getting prepared for all the things you talked about. So I just bought the ring light recently, and I'm now working towards some sort of a platform that I can have where I can actually stand up and do it. I'm going to try it for the first time. I'm really geared up for it. I hope it makes a real bang for my buck, so to speak.
Excellent. I mean, that's great to hear. Just I'll throw this in there. Make sure you try it a few times before that competition day. But yeah.
Yes, I do that. I actually have I have teenage kids, and they're brutally honest. So I run everything by them, and it's good because it sort of keeps me prepared for what's the worst case scenario, so to speak.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Tracy McWatt, may I ask what you might do differently or what your takeaway would be?
It's me.
I'm
So-
also going to try to stand up. I've never
Excellent.
done that before, and it will take a lot of rearranging of my space, but that's what I'm going to try to do.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'll ask one other person. I am going to ask Tracy, what will you be doing a little bit differently?
Yeah, I think I got to learn from today because I never record myself. I think record yourself and then get feedback. Just this one, no embarrass because you learn by listening your feedback, and then so you can tell. I think that's a very, very good strategy for practice. And certainly, I think dress well and also stand up. That is also today. I just felt I don't feel I'm in a website. I thought you just in front of me. So that is the difference when you stand up and you sit there. So I certainly I vote for that stand up and just like your normal practice. This is what I learned today.
Well, thank you, Tracy. One more, Iona, what's yours?
Well, I'm going to try and learn some video editing software. Definitely do the box breathing for sure, and get an elevated platform so I could use my computer. So thank you for that. An exceptional presentation.
Well, thank you, Iona. As I close, I will just leave my contact information, my LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anyone who's interested professionally. I come into organizations and I help others develop these skills as well. And I really emphasize, I started as an introvert. These are all skills that anyone can develop with just practice and effort. This new normal is here to stay, virtual and face-to-face. All of you can get ahead of the curve and even thrive in that new normal by developing these skills and simply, as two of you said, just to stand. Thank you.